everyone, we're all trying to figure out how this AI thing is going to work in the enterprise. At the same time, we're faced with all sorts of new applications, new technologies, AI code generation, and yet another model coming to the world from China. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, we're coming to you live from San Jose once again here for the Techstrong Gang. I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of AI Field Day and the Tech Field Day events for the Futurum Group. And also, you might recognize me from Tuesday episodes of Techstrong Gang. I am not Alan Schimmel, however, but I'm pretending to be him for these couple of episodes that we're recording live here. We are joined in San Jose by a great panel of independent technical folks who are participating, asking questions, discussing with our AI companies during AI Field Day. You'll catch all of those things live streaming on Techstrong TV. But let's meet who we've invited to be on the panel with us today. So first up, we've got a special guest once again. We've invited her back. Gina Rosenthal is one of my favorite tech thought leaders. I'm sorry to say that to you, Gina, but she is absolutely a tech thought leader, joining us here on the gang for the second day in a row.
Whoop, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Well, it's okay. Bad news out of D.C. Boy, that
Oh my gosh,
that was some crazy stuff.
That's just hard to even think about.
So also, we've got another great gang member here, John Willis. Great. We'll take it, right?
Take them when they come.
Yeah,
right?
right. Hey, yeah, great to be here. It was, the Tech Field Day has been great to be involved in doing Tech Gang here live. It's great stuff.
And of course, familiar face, Mitch Ashley.
Always good to be here. Good to be bumping elbows and talking AI and, out here in the real world. I don't know if Silicon Valley's the real world, but, yeah, sort of, maybe, kind of thing. Good to see everybody here on the gang. Yep. And welcome, Gina. Good to have you. And
Thank
John.
you.
Yeah.
Good to be back with you, too, Steve.
So we yesterday had Tech Field Day presentations by a number of different companies. The big ones that we saw that were sort of independent third-party product presentations were from VMware and from MemVerge. And it was interesting during those sessions that we had both companies. At some point, some of the delegates internally were saying, hey, these guys are trying to be the VMware of AI. Now, it's no surprise that VMware, or Broadcom more specifically, it's no surprise that Broadcom's VMware team would want to be the VMware of AI, because they want to be the VMware of everything. I mean, remember, they wanted to be the VMware of storage, they wanted to be the VMware of networking, they wanted to be the VMware of cloud. And so that makes sense. MemVerge was an interesting one because, previously I had seen their technology. We had witnessed what they're doing. They have some very cool tech, but I didn't understand the scope of their ambitions until they presented yesterday. And it became very clear that they also are trying to become the VMware of AI. In other words, they're trying to build a system that is scalable, that allows sharing of resources seamlessly, that maximizes your hardware investment. And the big thing that brought that home to me was in the first few minutes of their presentation when they showed that chart showing that only, that the majority, a third of enterprise AI installations are only using about 15% of the compute resources they have available. That was pretty mind-bending, and it shows the opportunity for somebody to be the VMware of AI. Because, Gina, we were there at the beginning when VMware first started. The reason VMware took off was because essentially the same stat. Most enterprises were using very little time of their resources, and there was an opportunity to do convergence. So talk to us a little bit about what you see as an analogy.
Well, first of all, I don't think VMware is trying to be the VMware of AI. I think they are the VMware of AI. So they've been working on, and this particularly when we're talking about MemVerge, is the GPUs. You spend so much money on a GPU, you need it to be able to have the compute go fast enough to run all of these jobs that building an AI platform will require. So VMware's been working on that. You can virtualize a VM or get to it, a GPU, or get to a GPU 3 different ways. And that's been true since I was at VMware, so 7 or 8 years ago. So they have done it, but that's what they're looking at is how do we have a virtualized machine, how do I get a slice of a GPU? And they also talked about wanting to make sure that the GPUs were being utilized across an organization and not hoarded, but shared by the vSphere management system, which all of that does make sense. And I think MemVerge is doing something very similar. They're looking at how do you provide, it was really cool, how do you provide fractional access to a GPU, and how can I put that in a management plane so that if I have 3 and you have 6 and you have 10, we put the whole lot of those that the company owns into a platform that we can share the GPUs across. And then if it gets too busy on one, we can move them off pretty transparently, which is an awful lot like vMotion of GPUs. So I think that it comes back to we're looking at how do I make, instead of the compute on a CPU on a server shareable, how do I make those GPUs shareable because they're so expensive yet so critical to AI workloads?
I think there's a spectrum of what they work on. And to me, VMware is how do you extend VMware into the world of AI applications and AI hardware. Whereas MemVerge was, in lieu of creating the next AMC show called GPU Hoarders, let's figure out a way to do GPU sharing. And their approach, they started with talking about the developer access through the IDE and being able to schedule that as part of your dev workflow. And then they were adding all the things of snapshotting and restarting across different hardware, which kind of led it to look like a bit of VMware. But my thought was, I don't know how MemVerge becomes the VMware of VMware of Gen AI, because they're already going to be it. So they've got to bifurcate.
Well,
some
my
other
point
way.
is it's an apples and oranges conversation, because GPU as a service and infrastructure as a service is a piece. And it might be the most interesting piece, given all the constraints and things we've learned and we know about. But the real problem is, how do you supply AI and all of its spectrum, from containers, from virtualization, from things like Harbor, and let's not forget networking, NSX, I'll go down the list, right? Governance, monitoring. So when you look about the Apple, which is MemVerge, which is a really interesting solution for a very interesting and hard problem. But when you start comparing Broadcom versus MemVerge, I pointed out that I think you could use the analogy of, do you run OpenShift, or do you just piecemeal Kafka? Do you run OpenShift? You can get Kafka, you get policy, you get monitoring, you get all this stuff. And I go back and forth depending on the client. Or do I do Kafka upstream? Do I do Kubernetes upstream? Do I put in all the monitoring myself? And I think Broadcom's going to have a more compelling argument, because the technical debt of doing all that yourself becomes a problem.
Well, but I don't think Broadcom is going to attract new customers because they become the AI of VMware. I think it's the path for VMware customers.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. And it's an easier sell to walk in and say, hey, do you really want to have a Kubernetes for this, a Kubernetes for that, a Kubernetes for that, or do you want to have a control plane that we kind of invented?
We already got it, right?
And the thing about that is that that's what you have to buy. So if I'm a current Broadcom customer, I know that I can only buy the whole kit and caboodle, and it's expensive. So yeah, it might be the best in class and have everything all there, but you're still going to have to pay for that, even if all I want is to have the ability to democratize the GPUs in an organization. For me, what I thought was interesting, I kept thinking, when they were talking about, when MemVerge was talking about sharing the GPUs, I kept thinking about, this just sounds like SRDF to me, back from the EMC days. And then having a conversation with the CEO, I find out, oh, you're a storage guy. So you're approaching this as, we've got this data sitting over here, we got to get it in really fast over here. I've got this equipment that's slowing me down because I can't get to all the equipment. How do we solve that problem? So I think that's an interesting problem. And I think if, you're talking about, they've got that, they're sitting on top of a layer of Kubernetes. So if I've infrastructure has coded all the things that I have, I should be able to build this pipelines that get it
I mean,
in
that's
there.
another thing, right? When you talk about like the things they didn't show with Broadcom yesterday is when I asked like what script. Well, there's years of Terraform in there.
Yeah.
Like that's not going to show. I mean, they're based on the questions. MemVerge, again, I'm rooting for them. They were very immature about what it was going to take to manage in Kubernetes, and that's going to include a lot of stuff that historically is run at scale. The other thing I mentioned too, I talked to the CEO last night too, and I'm going to give you, I had 3 margaritas, so I'm like, I think you need to go open source. You need to become the Lang chain. If this is something you're going to solve, you need to get in the middle of everything because you're going to have such an uphill battle dealing with the Broadcom messaging and whoever else is going to come out with this sort of like full solution. Red Hat obviously is going to have some. They already do it in Struct Lab and stuff like that. So, in order for them to become the Lang chain of this new stack, So I don't know if Well,
it's like sitting between. You don't need to be VMware. You already have that. You're running on Kubernetes. I'm not sure they know what they've got there yet.
Right.
All the capabilities that has as well as what they can do. But they want to be the stack on top of it, right? There's a lot of companies pushing for how do I get AI into production? There's the neural magics that Red Hat bought, right? Very much down that lane. And these guys could be on that same path. And I think there are other, I think it's going to be a very competitive, because Kubernetes doesn't step in and solve all of it, right?
No,
it's just a workload
it's a control plane.
Right?
It is just a control plane.
Exactly.
And it may not be a great control plane for AI. That was one of the things that came up in the discussion was that, many of the aspects of Kubernetes that makes it compelling for web scale modern applications makes it not all that compelling to run machine learning training and inferencing and so on.
Especially the training, yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But I think that the reason for me, I think I'm basically just exposing my tech nerd, hardware nerd background because, when I look at what they're doing with the fractional GPUs and GPU sharing and splitting and optimizing infrastructure utilization, it reminds me so much of the messages that we got from classic VMware way back in the day.
Really?
You've got this incredible investment in hardware. It's being underutilized. You've got to utilize it. But I think you're right. I'm going to say that, number one, we have the VMware of AI. It's called VMware.
Yeah.
Number two, MemVerge is a very different solution, and more of a technical solution that may end up finding its way in a completely different way than becoming some sort of hypervisor for training.
To your point, they're starting at obviously at different places, but they're talking to different audiences, right? VMware is talking to the running very large infrastructure, so they're solving the AI of VMware from that perspective. MemVerge is going to be talking about AI development, model training, AI engineering teams trying to do work to get things into production. They're going to solve different problems than I think VMware will ever get to.
I don't know if I fully agree with you. I know we talked about it earlier because they did focus on the sysadmin, the DevOps, right? But that was to create the developer experience.
Right.
So I think there is a path of development experience, and they did talk about sort of GPU management, and there was a difference in how they did that. So. And the other thing, I'm not well versed in CUDA or NVIDIA APIs but it sounded like MemVerge is really just using most of what NVIDIA provides, right? There's no you have to work with their management tools or APIs, and so to me that just says Broadcom will be able to catch them as quick, if it's all exposed, and they're just using what's the IP that comes out of NVIDIA. I'm not sure. I think there might be a race problem.
That's why I think they're going to have to find what it is they're going to pivot to.
That was the one of the questions. They really have to be clear about what exactly are they doing.
It's a very interesting product marketing problem from a messaging perspective because both companies, the tools are used by operations people. And operations people don't really, none of us really have the vocabulary and the understanding for how an AI workload works. It's just a workload, so you should be able to manage it and make all of the hardware performant and do everything the developers want to do. And that's the goal of now a platform engineer, which is a sysadmin in my view, but you can tell me I'm wrong. But to get the platform engineers to a place where they have a self-service platform for the developers and that team, the product owners, are running that show for how we want to share our GPUs or how we want to do things. So you may have this IT person that's connected to the IT department that's specifically trying to figure out, how do I get them to stop fighting over the GPUs? How do I make this so I can tell when the server the GPU is attached to is going to go down, and I can provide all the security and data protection and fault tolerance and everything that I need to provide to keep a business running. So they've got a really weird messaging problem where the people that are going to be using it need to understand how the developers work so they can serve that team, have no say in the buying at all. And that's a really hard problem. So you have to have, that's why they both led with this. We know you got a bunch of GPUs sitting out there underutilized. That's a lot of money you're wasting. Let's fix it, because that's the problem everybody can understand.
And I'll tell you this, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was early in Docker, right? And Pivotal killed us. Because you know who they sold to? The infrastructure people, right? And the infrastructure people who are that's going to be Broadcom's. They're walking in. We were saying, well, should they be more the most dangerous thing you can do is take the Docker route, where you tried to solve, you believed that if you could get billions of developers using your tool, you'd win. And that theory did not play out. I mean, Docker won, but Docker as a corporation lost. And it really was because the competitors of Docker were focusing, Pivotal, Mesosphere, like they were coming in at the infrastructure level. And Broadcom's walking in, to your point.
They already have the infrastructure.
And you have to win the infrastructure.
They have it.
Yeah, and they already own it.
And Broadcom, that's the thing I think that's important here. Broadcom bought VMware. Broadcom already was a leader in infrastructure. Now they're even more a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, Broadcom with VMware is even stronger than VMware ever was in that market. And you're right. I think that's where a lot of the money is.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the buyers are. And so I think that shows that these are not like competitive products. These are two completely different products, even though the messaging is similar. Well, we do have to move on to our next segment. And in our next segment, we're going to talk more about developers. Keep watching.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. So we are going to turn the page here from infrastructure to developers. And we're going to talk about one of the primary applications of AI, which is coding. Now, I think that there's this thought that somehow a chatbot can just spit out a functional application with no real input, and we don't need all those developers anymore. But I'm not sure that's really the case. So, John, talk to us a little bit about the landscape of AI coding tools.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was the ChatGPT moment, and then there was the Copilot moment, which sort of were really close to each other. And they had similar effect on different groups. Like the developers, immediately a lot of people were like, this is nonsense, this is terrible, you can't do it, it'll generate terrible code. And that was all baloney, because I talked to banks that have 18,000 Java developers, and I'm like, what percentage of them actually create great code? And like, so let's get off of this that the AI agents create bad code, right? Like, it actually creates better code than most of the coders in your organization. So then, like, Copilot was interesting, but then what came out, if you've heard Cursor sort of blew everybody's mind, because somebody got their 9-year-old kid to write an application with it, which again was more marketing and nonsense. But it sort of changed everything about Copilot is just like, give me code. Cursor was like intelligence in the IDE. And right now there's like 3 or 4 products that are really interesting, Cursor, Ada, but and now it's getting confusion. Like, what do I use, John, right? And I've been working on this like blog article that I'm trying to write. Like, the truth is you're going to use more than one, and it's going to be based on the task that you do. Like if I'm just wanted to prototype an idea, I might just do that in Claude. If I'm going to refactor code, I'm going to use probably Cursor or something called Ada or Client, right? So, and you're probably going to you're going to come up with your sort of best 2 or 3, and then you start understanding like cost. And then I read something interesting that like 80% of whatever coding tool you use comes down to the model you use. 20% is the interface, right? So now you got to really think about the coding tool and the model, where 80% of what you're going to accomplish is based on the model you use. And some model combination. So there's some really interesting, I think as executives and team leads try to decide, should we just pick one product and everybody has to use it? Do we allow them to have freedom? I think, and then there's the sort of scale of the coder. There's junior coders. Like for me, I'm not an industrial coder that codes every day, 8 hours. I like Ada. Friends of mine who are industrial coders like Cursor. It appeals to them better. So the IDE itself, the tool. I think there's just like token cost, use cases, multimodal. And one last thing I'll say is context is interesting. Some of the tools actually allow you to pull the full context. What happens when you go into Copilot, the context is just code. And that's not really how a software engineer builds an application. No. They have documentation, they have Terraform scripts, they have all these non-functionals. And if the AI tool is not aware of those things, your sort of collaboration with the tool is limited. So I think what we're finding is some of these tools that really allow you to expand the context, reads in a repo, and understands not just, runs how it was built, what are the dependencies, what's the documentation, even Jira tickets, right? That kind of stuff. So some of these ones, and I'll just, Ada seems to do a really good job, and there's a new one called Windsurfer. And then, as you pointed out earlier, in all that craziness Monday of DeepSeek, ByteDance put out something called Trey. And for obvious reasons, I haven't tried it yet. The same reason I didn't use the API over at DeepSeek.
Well, I think you did a really good job of kind of laying out the sort of the emergence of all the different tools that are built on what kinds of models. And a couple of things that you illuminated. One is it's context, as in what's the whole code base, what are the other things that developers do, right? What is that whole all mind process of managing and delivering software, not writing a piece of code? It's like the equivalent of what model generates the best code. It's like which model generates the best TV script versus a blog post, right? But you need really the full context of it. And a lot of what drives it is graph technology that interconnects. Here's your Jira tickets. Here's your open items that you're supposed to. Here's the technical debt backlog. Here's 5 ways that we have implemented this particular coding pattern in our software. What's the best application of it for this situation? That's what a developer looks at, right? What do I know about how we do? So we're still at the experimentation stage, which is a lot of the choose the best tool for whatever. Yeah. And still focused on the point of generating code. I think the next step beyond that is really taking it to what's a real workflow.
And it isn't black or white. It isn't like Cursor versus this versus Copilot. Yeah. It's like, is it a quick fix? Is it a refactoring, which is a big job? Like the different tools will have better workflow for the type of thing you do. Because the developer might be somebody who's just fixing to do commits, and developer might be refactoring 40,000 lines of code. Those are different type of things that require the tools react differently for those. So to your point, my best advice is do the bake-offs. There's some great video bake-offs out there. Literally try to take an application, take a source code base that you know really well, and try it in different scenarios. Quick fix, refactoring, from scratch, new componentry, new features, and then you'll get a feel for which of these tools actually are going to work.
Kind of take an engineering approach to it, right?
Yeah, like who'd go figure,
Very much so. Yeah. Well, and there's others, there's Tab9s. There's also companies who are doing a lot of work around analyzing code bases, like for app modernization, whether it be mainframes, what Java or whatever it is. Just telling you what this code does. What are what is it solving? What functions?
Well, the good news is a lot of those have all that built in now.
And that's combining those things exactly right. So it's the point of the article that we kind of surfaced that started this conversation is developer. How much time do they spend writing code, but also how much time are you going to spend understanding and fixing code that's generated for you, right? Or just the developer days of I'll just do it myself. It's faster.
Right.
Well, when that goes past that productivity hub. No, I'll just take what they gave me and I'll fix it when I need to fix it, right? I'll use the tool to help me understand what it's doing.
You know, that sounds terrifying to an ops person because worked in dev is a thing, right?
Hey, it would have worked, in production.
Yeah, but I mean,
But, no, and
that doesn't change, right?
No, it doesn't sound like it is going to change at
we've
all.
gone
I think it just happens
Stack
faster.
Overflow, cut and copy and paste to now, so I mean, because
Like, give me, what could get wrong?
Yeah, and I think that one more thing that I'll throw in here, and I think probably Gina's thinking about this too, because I know what your concerns are about a lot of these things is the privacy aspect. So when you're talking about, maybe you put your code base in this one and try it out, put your code base in this other one and try it out. I'm like, wait, what? You're going to do what with your source code? You're going to put it into, your proprietary enterprise source code and all of your commits and all of your bug reports and everything. You're going to put that into an AI engine that is, and so Cursor, for example, claims, that they're SOC 2 compliant and that they keep everything local. I like that. Not endorsing it by any means, but I'm just saying, I'm glad that they surfaced that right away but that's my concern is, you put your code into these things. How do you know where your code is going?
You don't.
Well, but when you enable Google Gemini on your Google Workspace account and has access to everything.
a lot of that's happening. With
It's happening all over the place.
But
It's a legitimate concern.
But the thing about it is people don't know. So this is going back to the ops people don't understand the architecture. So we're having a hard time figuring out how do you manage everything. But I think for all of us, like what if you put something into Google or Microsoft and you don't have a paid account, at least with a paid account, you've got at least I don't know if it's a facade, but they tell you that they're not going to do anything with your personal data. If you go to some of these other new ones that are popping up, all bets are off. And I think people need to educate themselves about that. It's so important.
Gina, I don't know if this will help, but I can imagine a day not very far down the road that because we understand your code base, the AI does, maybe it generates some of the code, some of the not. An ops person can say, why is Kubernetes doing this?
Absolutely.
And it isn't going to say, well, Kubernetes has these 3 features and here's how they work. It's going to say, here's what our code is doing, and here's 3 things you might do to
Right,
it.
and I think that the
that's
implementation.
exciting.
Can you
That's the
imagine that? Like it worked in dev, it's not working in ops because of all the other things we have to do in ops to lock everything down, and I can just ask a question and it tells me. Yeah, that's amazing.
And again, the model itself, I wouldn't trust like NSA code to this, but like OpenAI, they state that we're not trained on your data, right? Like, I still think there's dragons out there of putting anything in context, but at least there's model providers that clearly state we do not train.
They know it's an issue.
Yeah.
Right?
But you have to pay for it, and in my experience working with devs, I used to work, one place that I worked, it was astrophysicists, postdocs, and they had to get on our network, and we'd get a ticket if they tried to plug in, and we'd go and help them out, help them, fill out all the forms they need to have. One time I went to look, and the dude, I swear to goodness, had like an all cardboard box with a towel in it that like you put lost kittens in, and he had breadboarded his Linux machine together. And I was this was way before like cell phones, so I don't have a picture, but I just turned around and went to get my boss, like, I'm not even.
Like an academic research
devs.
environment to open things up.
The good news is a lot of the large corporations that I've been working with are really setting standards on things like
they have to.
Here's the only Copilot you can use, and it's already again.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at that just because setting corporate standards for anything is not always that effective, especially when it's as easy as going to a website.
I agree, but they have to do that. Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all, show.
Oh, I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying that it's not going to work.
Well, it works in the sense that as we get, this is another whole subject, but the whole sort of auditing and I think what's going on in, what we wrote about Investments Unlimited, that what's going on there about making sort of DevOpsing auditing, if you will, a terrible phrase. It's putting more light on the things that you're not doing as an organization. We're informing internal auditors way better now than we were 3 to 5 years ago. And that puts a flashlight on you, because you have to document the supply chain of what you did. How did you get from your code to deployment to all that stuff? If you're sort of creating attestations around that.
Fantastic book, by the way. Download
that allows a
Investments
flashlight
Unlimited.
for the organization to start finding those
But we still
shadowy.
we have to talk to the individual, everybody, because right now there's so much hype around AIs and models and do this and do that, and it's exciting, and it's, oh my God, I want to go try it. And I think there needs to be a little bit of education of like, I know you want to try it, but really, really think about what will happen if you connect to this API, what will happen if you do anything with data you really care about or that your boss might really care about.
Yeah,
The hype is it.
Somebody said, I think it was John, that this was the greatest data exfiltration in history because ByteDance, or not ByteDance, because DeepSeek got so much attention that probably literally millions of people dumped all sorts of sensitive information into it immediately, and that was that.
Yeah, TikTok went, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah, really.
That's a good one.
So we got to move on. Thank you very much. This is a conversation I know that's going to continue on the Techstrong Gang. Up next, we're going to look at a new model coming in from China called Qwen. Stay tuned.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. We are at AI Field Day, and if you've noticed, every one of our conversations has been about AI, but that's not all that unusual. I think everything on every episode of Techstrong Gang for the last couple of months has been AI. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about another new model coming out of China that claims to be even better than DeepSeek. This is Alibaba's Qwen 2.5 Max. It says that it outperforms DeepSeek's R1 and that it uses low amounts of energy and all this kind of stuff. Essentially, it's the same story again from Alibaba, which is a huge Chinese cloud company. Who wants to take this to start?
I'll go just quickly. I mean, Qwen has been around for a little bit, and there's been versions of it. Alibaba's real. I mean, Alibaba Cloud is real. It has been real. It's been, there have been a number of retail companies that used Alibaba Cloud because you couldn't use Amazon in China. So if you were Starbucks, you literally had to bifurcate your cloud infrastructure between sort of Amazon and Alibaba. So Alibaba has been, sort of vetted to the quote that any company based out of China can be. The Qwen models are interesting. If you follow Reuven Cohen, I'll try to get some show notes for y'all. He's done investigations going back a couple of months now on all the China models, including DeepSeek, are very restrictive. So they create inference guardrails on things like you can't ask about Tiananmen Square. That's just the obvious. The unobvious is when you put those constraints in an inference model, the algorithm type models that you do, it actually creates more availability for jailbreaks. And Reuven was able to show some really good examples of how you can use inference jailbreaks to get it to ask questions that the model itself is designed not to answer. So again, I think this will be a problem that will bubble up on a lot of the models that come out of China. The fact that they create restrictions in these sort of algorithms themselves or in the inference actually makes them more vulnerable to jailbreaks.
I wonder if it sort of sets the space race to get to general AI, it's a bit to the side, right? We're all focused on kind of what the next model is. Who's going to get to the singularity first? And I was making this point the other day, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday's show, talking about, but there's also good enough AI. Not everybody needs, the singularity to solve every problem.
AGI and ASI are false flags.
Yeah.
It takes us, it's a distraction. It's a distraction from
Absolutely.
What do you need for AI? Let's stop worrying about whether it's going to take over humankind or terminate.
And it's not a
computer
single
scientists.
point.
Let's be engineers.
Yeah.
And work with what we got.
It's not a single point. Isn't general AI going to be like what Q general
Let's steal
AI?
that.
My general AI is smarter than yours. Anyway, I think that's sort of that's part of the race. The money's made because nobody's going to be able to afford to run it, right? I mean, that's going to take the highest compute. of anything. What's interesting is the application of AI and how accessible it is to people. And I think that's why TikTok being jealous of a DeepSeek. I called it deepfake the other day by accident.
Oops.
I guess Freudian in some ways. But
TikTok's got its own stuff going on. It's the they're after the culture. They're not
they
after
are.
the.
They are.
But they're all from ByteDance, though, by the
Yeah.
way. It's all coming from ByteDance,
yeah.
So.
So for me, I think if I look at it from a product marketing perspective, it's not an accident that these two models were released, one right after the other, I don't believe, especially a few days after the U.S. Government had a huge announcement about investing
Stargate.
tons of money into Stargate, and this is what we're going to do as our country to get up on AI and get all of this done in this side of the world. It's also, they announced yesterday was Chinese New Year, so that's a great big celebration day. I think that's a thing too. And I kind of find it's all around the hype, right? Which is what marketing does. We drive the hype to get everybody excited about it. But the market is not the same in China as it is in the West. It is controlled by the government. Everything that happens is orchestrated by the government. So, and allowed or not allowed by the government. Mm-hmm. So very interesting that, we have to look at it. China is a foreign adversary to America. And we have to look at it from that perspective because we are in America, we're not in China. And we are a global universe, and we do want to cooperate and be colleagues with all of our people, all of our friends from other countries. At the same time, they're not playing the same playbook that our companies play by.
And the playbook has changed too, right? Just as an author and 5 years ago, if I was offered to speak in China, I'd go like that because you sell crazy amount of books if you're an author in China. I won't go near that place right now. If you read about people being detained, so the climate of even the global economy within the last 3 or 4 years has changed. As a person who speaks, I know we all speak around the world.
Right.
Like there's no amount of money I would go into China right now.
Well, I'm not saying that as like a down thing. I'm just saying, let's look at this if I'm looking from a marketing perspective, what are they trying to do? What hype are they trying to achieve? Because we know that there are definitely some constraints as far as privacy goes with those models and sharing information. But so they want to get it hyped up, get everybody excited about the next model. And they have done, let's be honest, some really cool engineering work. That part's amazing. But why is it so hyped? Why did they pick the timing? And what does the Chinese government have to win from that?
And also I think we should point out too, as was said at the beginning here, DeepSeek didn't come out of the blue. This was just the latest iteration from a company that you would have seen this coming if you had been watching closely. The same with Qwen. As we just heard, there's been other Qwen models. This is just the newest one. Okay. It seems pretty good. And as we talked about yesterday when talking about DeepSeek as well, in many cases, the U.S. Restrictions and controls on AI components forced them to build these models in a more efficient manner. So just like DeepSeek, the Qwen is a mixture of experts model that uses a lot of small models kind of teaming up together. It makes a lot of sense. This is the microcomputer versus the mainframe in AI sense. And so it's not really a surprise that this thing came, and it won't be a surprise tomorrow or next week when another model comes out claiming to beat DeepSeek or ChatGPT or whichever the benchmark is. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is basically who's got the biggest, baddest, fastest, strongest, when what we really should be talking about, I think, is the application side of things, which is what we were talking about earlier on this discussion.
Well, elevated a level, you mentioned the marketing of it. It's geopolitical marketing of it, right? Because China is the way it is, then it creates all kinds of conspiracy theory or reality, whichever you choose to believe. Is this the Star Wars moment for China of setting this big thing that now we have to all go chase them after, kind of like Reagan did with Star Wars back in the 80s, right? Or is this something legitimate? And I think, by the way, self-shameless plug, either today or yesterday, Futurum Research came out with a paper, our kind of position, thinking about it, different parts of the DeepSeek announcement. Daniel Newman contributed than I did as a bunch of other analysts. So go check that out on futurumgroup.com.
Well, we do have to wrap up now. Thank you
Sorry,
for joining
Gina, I
us.
took your moment
wait,
there.
you got one more point?
You had
I have one point.
Okay, hit me,
Skip
John.
one
I mean,
then.
there's no doubt China is an adversarial nation, but yet Monday and Tuesday we heard a lot of it's China, there's America and China. Well, the stuff that came out of France, Mistral. So there wasn't. So on the computer science spectrum, this is just different countries that are just showing that they have IP, they have knowledge. But I can't exclude the fact that I'd be more trustworthy of Mistral from France than I would from Quinn.
So when did Mistral come out?
That was a year or 2 years ago.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah,
from a
no, the
marketing
timing.
perspective,
I
right?
totally agree with your
Timing's
timing.
everything.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I totally
right?
agree with the timing point. Anyway,
I was saying because I was sad it was over.
Well, then we will have to. I'll put the screws on Alan to invite you back.
Yeah.
And,
I get to meet Alan. That'll be awesome.
that would be amazing. So thank you very much for watching. Tune in Techstrong TV for all of the AI Field Day sessions. We've got some great presentations, discussions. We're going to do a roundtable discussion. We've got the weekly Tech Field Day podcast streaming on Techstrong TV every Tuesday. And of course, check out the Techstrong Gang every day, every weekday. You'll find at least 3 of us, and I'm going to guess 4 of us, back on the Techstrong Gang in the coming weeks, and we'll see you there. So thanks for watching, and Alan, come on back. You're our only hope to rescue us from my hosting. Take care.